Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this special meeting of the Bend Metropolitan Planning Organization. Our meeting today has a special topic, which is the interchange at Baker Road. And as you can see, our screens are filled with folks from ODOT who are here to talk to us about that Baker Road interchange. So I will turn it over at this point.
So I'll just jump to the next slide. Hobie, do you want to give a quick update on just our virtual meeting guidelines?
Absolutely. So we're all getting a little more comfortable with Zoom, but they did take a chat function out of here. So if you have any questions, please raise your hand. If you'd like to email me a question where you don't want to say it out loud, I'm happy to take those at janderson@bendoregon.gov. And I think we'll probably add the chat function back up, but please raise your hand. As soon as somebody gets a break, I'll make sure that your concern or comment is addressed. And this meeting is recorded and you can access it through the YouTube live stream, or later, if you want to go back to this meeting, it will be available through YouTube. That's about it.
And Councilor Campbell, do you want to do just walk through do roll call?
Absolutely. So Barb Campbell, I am here. Megan Perkins, we've got Megan with us today, I can see. We've got Rita Schenkelberg from the Bend City Council as well. Phil Chang, there he is. Hi, Phil.
Yep.
Phil is with us today. And did we get Bob Townsend?
Not quite yet. So
I don't think we have Bob yet, but
he'll be on his way shortly.
That's great. And we have lots of his alternates for MPO.
So Rick Williams will be covering.
That's great. Thank you. For MPO staff today, we've got Tyler Deakey, who is our MPO manager. We have Hovey Anderson, who is the program coordinator, and Andrea Napoli, who is a senior planner. And then we also have ODOT and consultant staff today. We have Dawn Morehouse from ODOT and John Boskett, who is with DKS.
Then we have two others. Cameron Prow is here from Typewrite 2. She does our minutes and recordings, make sure that we follow all the right guidelines. Thank you, Cameron, for being here. And then we've got public, Benjamin Steen. So as public comments come in, we can actually take things from anyone. So please join in at any time. And I'm just adding two new attendees here, Bob Townsend and David Amitton from ODOT. So
excellent.
And I'm on the call now. And I'm sorry, and Greg Bryant from Deschutes Riverwoods Homeowners Association, and also on our MPO Technical Advisory Committee and other committees. So,
yeah.
Excellent.
I think we're set. Got them all.
All right, thank you. So the purpose of our meeting today is to kick off the US Highway 97 Baker Road project. Not sure what that acronym stands for. And that's one of the things we will learn today is what does the acronym IAMP stand for? And then we will discuss the goals and objectives to guide the project.
All right. Is Dawn, are you going to jump in now on these next couple of slides?
Sure.
That would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, so the Baker Road IAMP, which is an interchange area management plan, We'll examine how the Baker Road interchange and surrounding street system operate both now in the present and over the next 20 years, and then identify strategies to preserve and improve the safety and capacity of the interchange. So the IAMP also will identify current and projected traffic conditions based on existing and projected land uses in the area and in accordance with the City of Bend and Deschutes County comprehensive plans, including the sub-area plans from each of those comp plans. The IAMP will identify current and future safety and operational issues, generate potential solutions, and then identify the preferred solutions to these deficiencies. And I say solutions because we could build multiple improvements around the interchange. It's probably not just going to be one complete tear down and rebuild of this particular interchange. We're not looking at building an entire new interchange at this location, like we have with other similar IAMPs throughout the state.
And Don, I'm so sorry. Do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself to the group a little bit?
Sure. Yeah. So Don Morehouse with ODOT Region 4. I work as the land use and transportation planner for the region, and cover a number of different aspects of transportation planning for ODOT. But I'm working as the contract coordinator for this particular project. Working with John Boskett from DKS, as well as city and the county.
Excellent. Thank you. I appreciate that,
Yeah.
Don.
All right, Don, are you handing it to me?
Yeah, let's who actually has control of the PowerPoint?
I do. This is Tyler.
Okay.
I'll take it from here. And yeah, that slide's fine. If in case you didn't catch that, the IAMP stands for Interchange Area Management Plan. I'm guessing most of you probably aren't familiar with what those are. They're pretty similar to a lot of other kind of major transportation planning studies you're probably more familiar with, like the citywide and MPO transportation system plan, or the US 97 Parkway plan, which is just dealing with a corridor. This has a lot of the same kind of process and steps, but obviously we're really focused on an area around an interchange. As we'll show you in a little bit, kind of roughly the area we're looking at. And, some of the background and kind of why, IAMPs are done. I think IAMPs kind of became a thing, I think, in about the year 2000. So they've been around for about 20 years. And one of the big motivating kind of drivers in creating a plan like this was obviously interchanges are pretty expensive. Even if you're just modifying an existing one, you're oftentimes into tens of millions of dollars, much more for a whole new one. And I think, ODOT was seeing kind of a trend where they'd spend a lot of money into an improvement like that. And then obviously it's a nice new connection to a high volume facility. And so development would get stimulated and come in really fast. Sometimes there'd be pressure to change zoning, right, for big box retail, things like that, because they want good access to a highway or a freeway. And then all of a sudden that, 20, 30 year plus investment that they thought they had ended up being 10, 15 years. And so, one of the kind of the big motivators of doing IAMPs is knowing if you may be doing a major investment in an interchange facility is kind of getting on the same page with the local agencies about how we're going to invest in the interchange and what the expectations are for growth around it and how we're going to manage that to make sure that it serves its intended purpose. And so, ultimately, this plan, like others, we will be wanting to see local adoption as well as state adoption, again, to kind of demonstrate that everyone's in agreement with that. And so, for the kind of the reason why we're doing it here at the Baker, not interchange, If you're not terribly familiar with that, hopefully you are. It's just south of the city. It was a lot further of the city when it was built about 30 years ago. And at that time, it was built to serve a sparsely developed kind of rural area. And then it was known that, truck movements from US 97 to the south to kind of bypass the rest of the city and get out, Knott Road 27th up to US 20 to head out to the east was a common movement as well. So those are really kind of the two main factors in the design of that current interchange. And obviously there's been a lot of growth. The urban growth boundary is now, I think, within a half mile of the interchange. We're expecting a lot more growth that isn't there yet. And, it's possible that with another UGB expansion, the urban growth boundary could be right up against the interchange. And so even today, with a lot of that future growth not even there yet, I know when we were working on the US 97 Parkway plan, which the Baker interchange was a part of, it was right at the southern end of that corridor. We were already seeing congestion issues and some safety issues cropping up at the interchange ramp terminals on Baker and Knott. But knowing that it's kind of a complex interchange, as we'll show you if you didn't see the picture there, if you're not familiar with it. I don't know, Tyler, if you want to go back just one slide, I think, where there's the aerial photo, maybe 2 slides. There we go. Where you see the southbound ramp terminal, within 400 feet, you've got a busy interchange ramp terminal. You've got a road that leads to a store and a school. You got a railroad crossing, and then you've got an intersection with Cinder Butte, which is a county arterial. And so it may not be simple to just, put in a traffic signal or something like that to increase capacity. We may have to think a little bit harder on this one. And so the recommendation from the Parkway plan was to do an interchange area management plan to kind of have a more holistic, thoughtful approach to how we want to do this and accommodate all the future growth and deal with these safety issues. I think that was actually a recommendation of an earlier study from a Bend to Lava Butte refinement plan. So it has come up a couple of times now. So Tyler, if you want to go back to the slide I was on there. There we go. So again, the purpose statement, I think, is fairly straightforward for this US 97 Baker IAMP. It's to ensure safe and efficient operation of the interchange for all modes of travel through the 20-year planning horizon. That all modes is pretty important because, again, it was built as a rural interchange, so it's not real, bike ped friendly at the moment. And identify transportation improvements, management strategies, and land use policy actions needed to support plan development. So you go ahead to the next slide. So the study area we're looking at, obviously we're considering any potential land use changes in a much broader area than what I'm showing on the map. Really anything that could affect, traffic movement through this interchange, which, could be as far out as, 27th Reed Market, where all this, future growth is going to happen. But where we more expect probably the transportation improvements and more immediate impacts to be related to the interchange are kind of in this area we've circled in yellow, and probably mostly more around the immediate interchange itself. Really, we're looking more at the area to the north around China Hat and US 97, because there are some planned changes there that would remove the right in, right out access point on the highway, put in an overcrossing. And because there aren't a lot of access points to US 97 or ways to get across it, those changes to connectivity could have an impact on the interchange area itself. And so we want to look at how that could influence the type of improvements we're going to look at. Go ahead to the next slide. So this kind of shows the major steps of the project as well as our anticipated timeline. Again, the kind of the major steps are pretty similar to a lot of planning studies. So you can say here today we're fairly early in the process here, and again, this being our kickoff with you, where to date all what we've done up here in the top, you can see where the little memos and bars are. We've looked at kind of the problems, at least the definition and background. We've set up some draft goals and objectives, which is largely what I want to go over with you today. And then we're also working on kind of that baseline information, like what are the problems today if we forecast out to the year 2040? How do those look? Are they different? And then we would transition around April into starting to develop some solutions to address those. And then hopefully around, after we develop the solutions, then as we get to like October, November, when we've picked a preferred solution, then we want to look at some of those management strategies. Again, it's talking about what do we need to do to make sure we get the full useful life out of the investment. And then putting that into the draft plan in early 2022 and kind of moving through a hopefully adoption process, probably like April, May of 2022. And kind of below the white bars, it's showing some of the meetings we're having and the kind of the outreach efforts. The orange circles, that's you are our executive steering committee. And then we also are going to have a project advisory committee, which I think I'm going to talk about in the next slide. We have not met with them yet. And then we have one public open house that we're hoping to have in like August, September. And that's going to be at about the point where we've got it's kind of the alternatives that we've developed for consideration before we select something, getting public feedback on some of those ideas. And then what I'm showing at the bottom in the kind of the purple squares is some work sessions with city and the county elected officials prior to starting any hearings process. Let's see, go ahead, one more slide. So a little more about our decision-making structure for this project. Again, you're our representatives of our adopting bodies for this plan. So we're looking at you as our steering committee, taking direction from you. If we have any hard decisions to make, we'll be looking to you for guidance. Our project advisory committee, as it states, they're going to be more of an advisory role. What I've listed below them, that's about 90% confirmed. We haven't quite finished our roster, but we've that kind of shows you the breadth of folks we're trying to involve more closely in this project. And it's a pretty broad range of agency folks, which are going to help us with policy standards, coordination with other projects or efforts that they're involved in, as well as people that represent some of the major stakeholders, like hopefully the store. We haven't got them confirmed yet, but we're trying to reach out to them. The school, and then another thing we're really trying to do is include stakeholders that hopefully are going to really help us connect to some of the more historically underserved community members. So we can make sure that we're getting them an opportunity to get engaged and hear from them about their interests in this project and how that might impact them. And so again, we've almost got that confirmed, and we're hoping to have our first meeting with them pretty soon. Let's go to the next slide. And then, well, we have a pretty broad range of community stakeholders on the advisory committee. As far as the general public connection, ODOT's got a project website set up, and we've got the one public open house where we'll get feedback on the alternatives that are being developed. And let's see, go forward one more. Actually, I'm going to pause right there because I think this is where I transition into the next part of the meeting where we start talking about goals and objectives. But before I do, I guess I wanted to hear if you had any questions or comments on just the project itself, what it is, or the process that I described.
Counselor Schenkelberg here. I just, what kind of has been you all's method with like reaching out to the community? Because I feel like the Riverwood Country Store would be directly affected. And so has someone kind of gone in there to talk to, you know, the management and kind of get a sense from that community that's going to be directly affected with all of that construction?
Yeah, I can answer that. I'm in the process right now of trying to get a representative on board from the country store to sit on our PAC, our Public Advisory Committee.
Yeah, I know that, like, sorry, I think John mentioned very briefly that that hadn't really been solidified yet.
Right, so we're still working on confirming attendance
Okay.
on our Public Advisory Committee roster. We're hoping to have that complete by the end of this week, because we've really got we have to get that meeting scheduled. Hopefully by the second week in March.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I had one. I see on this list of the Project Advisory Committee is the Bend MPO. So will we be receiving an invitation for the meeting you are speaking about?
Yes.
Yeah, and I believe Tyler is our representative, at least as far as the MPO on the PAC. Because the rest of you, at least on the policy board, you're our steering committee.
I understand. So these groups, it's more like each group is going to send a representative to participate in the committee meetings. Is that right?
Yeah, we have a more detailed roster with specific names for, like I said, we've confirmed almost all of these already, but like for ODOT, Deschutes County, I think there's typically like one person. There might be two for Bend, if I recall right, but yeah, usually it's one person.
Okay, thank you.
A question for you, Counselor Campbell. I mean, would you like to be invited to the Project Advisory Committee meetings as an elected official, just to listen and hear those discussions?
Sure.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, I will note that those meetings are to be open to the public as well. So we'd advertise them, and the general public can listen in. We'll have a brief comment period.
Excellent. Thank you.
We've got two hands up, Megan and Phil.
That's right. Megan, do you want to go ahead and go?
Sure. Just sort of looking at the map, I'm thinking about our unhoused community that is living out there in China Hat, and I'm wondering if that was a consideration for having representative on the advisory committee, or just if you sort of thought about how that would proceed forward.
That's a great question. I haven't thought about including a representative from that at this point in time. Yeah, I would definitely like to hear more thoughts on that.
Dawn, so I'm working right now on our public participation plan, and I am meeting with a couple different representatives from representing homeless in the area, so I can certainly coordinate contacts with you.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you. And Phil, you had a question?
Yeah. There's the fire station that is really close to the interchange, over there on the west side of the highway. I was just thinking they might. It's very close to the interchange, and I don't have a good sense of how much they are actually using the interchange, or whether they're just situated there and then they spend a lot of time going into Deschutes River Woods. But to the extent that either A, they need to cross Highway 97, B, they need to get on and off 97 at that interchange. Like, for example, if they're trying to get people, if they're doing like an ambulance run or something, they might have some unique perspectives on what they need out of the interchange, or what kind of features would be important to them.
Yeah, thanks, Phil. We're definitely in the process of reaching out to Bend Fire and Rescue to hopefully have a representative on our PAC.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, I see you got the city on here, but like, wasn't sure if you were reaching down to, all the specific relevant departments.
That's an excellent question, Phil. Thank you. Any other, and I guess I'm kind of reminding myself that these will be public meetings. And so I'm kind of telling myself, okay, who am I going to remind that this is happening so that they can be there for public comment? And so at the very least, I think we can be sure to have City of Bend Emergency Services commenting on the meetings. People have a lot of meetings. All I'm trying to say, I don't want to sign people up who aren't in the room today. But yes, Phil, I absolutely think that the City of Bend safety folks need to be there as well. Excellent point. Are there any other questions? All right, I think we're ready to move on.
Okay, so goals and objectives, and hopefully you all saw the memo that was included in the packet. And really it was I think Tyler mentioned the first 10 pages were really the meat of what I was hoping you'd get a chance to read. And the goals and objectives are on, I think, pages, sort of the end of that first 10 pages, pages 6 through 10, if you have that handy. So about the goals and objectives, much like, similar planning studies some of you may have participated in, we use those. We want to develop them early because they're gonna guide the development of the types of solutions that we're looking at, right? It's important to know what the community and stakeholders feel are important, so we hit the target. And also, when we do develop solutions, all right, we need to know what the target looked like and if we hit it. So we'll use those to evaluate our alternatives and kind of see, how good did they do and which ones, rate better, or how do we need to refine them to do a better job. And so, what we've put together so far, and again, obviously this is our first meeting with you and we have not met with our advisory committee yet. So we'll be doing a similar discussion with them in our first meeting to get their feedback. But, for at least to start the conversation, I put together this initial set of goals and objectives. What you have there, it's largely just from kind of us looking at, our specific project and the kinds of issues that we think that we may be dealing with. But also, since there have been some similar planning projects done pretty recently with some similar and some of the same stakeholders, we borrowed from those as well where it seemed to make sense. And that was things like the US 97 Parkway Plan. And there was also a Bend North Interchange study, which was not an adopted plan. It was more of a technical exercise, but it just concluded, and it was kind of almost like the bookend, the other bookend of Bend compared to the Baker interchange. It was looking at a potential new interchange just outside of Bend to the north. And so that was how, or at least what the thought process was behind what there is now. My two big caveats with this, we have not, obviously applied any weighting to any of this at this point, but, if you think that weighting is needed, we can certainly do that. And while I have numbered things, and they are, of course, in some order, the order is not significant. The numbering is only for referencing. So no emphasis has been placed on anything at this point. Go ahead to the next slide. So in the slides I have after this one, it's looking at the specific goals and objectives just like you have them in the handout. So we can look at them in more detail, but just kind of first stepping back and looking at just the goal areas that are covered. That's what I've listed here. And so right now we're covering the topics of, there's the efficient motor vehicle, travel oriented goal. There's one about safety for all modes of travel. The third one is kind of our economic development goal, both locally and regionally, since we have businesses in the area, and future development in the area, but also US 97 is serving regional travel. 4 is looking at creating better opportunity for multimodal travel in the area. 5 is really about equitable participation, but also evaluating the outcomes on people from different groups in the community, and are the outcomes disproportionate as far as the benefits and burdens that people might experience. And then the 6th goal, it's kind of our plan consistency goal, because some other planning efforts have happened, so we want to make sure that what we're doing is meshing with those. And then the last goal is, I kind of call it our practical goal. We want to make sure that whatever we come out of with this is implementable, both from we can construct it and maintain it, but it's also reasonable that we could actually fund this. We don't want a $200 million project with no expectation we're ever going to be able to pay for it. So that's kind of the breadth of goals. If you're thinking about topics that are important to you in the community, before maybe we get into a little bit of the details on each one, I would like to know from you, are you seeing any gaps in this? Or just something you want to make sure gets covered? And I'll throw one out there as you're thinking, because I found one yesterday. There was a reason for it, but I can rethink that. Typically, and to be honest, a lot of these projects like this one have very similar sets of goals, at least the topics. The one that's missing here is really one that's specifically focused on the environment, or greenhouse gas reduction, or however you might want to phrase it. The reason it wasn't in there initially was because if I looked at the types of objectives that typically end up falling under it, and I actually just this morning pulled up the US 97 Parkway Plan, which had an environment goal, and I looked at the specific objectives, and they were already covered under the other goals we already have. So there was some redundancy, which usually happens. It had objectives like supporting multimodal travel options, and reducing emissions through more efficient motor vehicle travel, and it had, I think, objectives about minimizing land impacts. And right now we have those covered under goals 1, 4, and 7. That said, I think there's certainly merit in going ahead and making it its own goal anyway, just to emphasize that is important. So I think people who look at the plan know that was a specific consideration. So I'll put that out there, I guess, to the group is, do you think that we need to add that a goal specifically about the environment in here with the rest? I'm seeing at least one head nod.
Have we got head nods for that? None of
Okay.
I think we have head nods.
We will do that. Again, I think the objectives will probably be very similar to ones that are in there. So at the end of the day, it may not add a lot of new evaluation criteria, but I think that is important to add. Anything else before I jump into some of the more specifics on what we've included in each of these? You can always come up with something if something strikes you later.
John, could I go ahead and ask? I think we all know that intersection now, which is the off-ramp if you're going south, that intersection is a big problem area with folks coming from the country store and everywhere else. Are there other problems with the interchange right now? What are we focused on solving in the way of problems with the intersection? Anything specific beyond it's just, was for a rural? Go ahead.
Let's say we're looking more deeply and thoroughly into that in our memos, I think 3 and 4. But some of the key issues are just as you mentioned that I've heard that when there's a rail crossing, which I don't think happens a lot from what I'm hearing, but I think it's at least daily, is you can get some pretty big backups on that southbound ramp terminal. And, just as we said before, even without the complexity of the rail crossing, you've got a lot of connections, right? The Baker Court, the ramp terminal, the rural arterial of Cinder Butte, all in very close proximity. There aren't any turn lanes on Baker Road anywhere in there either, right? So anytime somebody wants to turn left somewhere and can't, it can stop things up pretty fast. So there's a lot of conflicts there, obviously. Like from a transit perspective, I know right now the bus stop is actually west of the railroad. It's down Cinder Butte a little bit at the church. And, I think just for their hope is to try to move it, to the east side of the railroad. And so I think, just changing that and finding them a better way to do that would just kind of help their transit operations. I mean, from a bicycle pedestrian standpoint, I mean, there really aren't a lot of standalone facilities, right? It was built as a rural interchange in a rural area. But I think we're already seeing more people walking and biking. And I know it's a pretty popular biking recreational route. You've got the school down there. More growth should drive more activity. And so, I suspect, as I think kind of our goals and objectives are going to show, is that even though we're still going to be kind of on the urban fringe, is that the level of facilities that we end up, wanting to put in for people walking and biking are probably going to be more consistent with, an urban environment. So we have, much better separation, low stress facilities. I know there are a variety of paths in this area that are planned coming from both the north and the south, right through our interchange area. And so, we need to make sure that we're accommodating that and not doing something that's going to, make those connections more difficult. So yeah,
Thank you. Was there anything specific that caused this interchange to rise up and need this process? Trip counts or accidents? Is that how this interchange got to the top of the list? I guess is kind of why I'm curious.
Yeah, a little both of what you said. I think the need was identified, I think, both through an earlier Bend to Lava Butte refinement study, as well as the US 97 Parkway plan looked at this interchange and recognized that there were already some congestion issues. There were some crash problems. And I think also acknowledging how much future growth is coming. I think the desire to get ahead of all that future growth and figure out what do we need to do to the interchange, right before that happens, I think is really what was driving the need to do this planning study sooner than later.
All right, thank you. Phil, go ahead.
Something just occurred to me. South of this area is a major problem area for deer crossing Highway 97 and lots of deer collisions. Does that issue extend this far north, or is it really like more kind of Sun River, Lapine, that zone?
Don, it looks like you're going to respond.
Yeah. So I know that is definitely an issue with basically South Century to the Forest Service boundary. The project there is covering that. That's not to say that we wouldn't be looking at that potentially with this study with the IAMP. But I do know that there's a pretty big part of the South Century to Forest Service boundary wildlife crossing.
Right. Yeah, and I mean I don't know how if deer collisions were a major concern in this area, like what you could even do about that in this, in the context of an interchange, besides like putting up a whole separate like overpass thing, for wildlife or something. But I just wanted to ask that because I know
Yeah,
it's a concern along
good
97 in other places.
Yeah, I'd have to look into that more. And I don't think it's shown up thus far just within the, the area that we're looking in, which is very limited. But I know when we were working on the Parkway plan, we were seeing a history of, deer collisions, all up the Parkway, right, further into Bend. So I have no doubt that it's still an issue here.
I've got a question. This is Greg Bryant.
Go right ahead, Greg.
Does the evacuation route, where does that involve on these 7 or 8 points?
I'm sorry, I only caught the last half of your
Evacuation routes. Where does that show on these 7 or 8 goals?
Let's look at that when we get into the next couple of slides here and look at the specifics.
Okay.
Let's find a place for it. I don't think it's specifically spelled out, but maybe it could fit under the safety one.
Yeah, that's what I thought, but thought I'd bring it up.
Thank you, Greg.
Yeah.
All right, I think we're ready to go ahead and move on.
Okay. So most of these slides just look at one of the goals at a time. I was able to fit 2 on this slide, so it's got 2. So in the table you see, we show the goals at the left, their associated objectives, which obviously give you a little bit more information about what we're going to consider related to that goal. The evaluation criteria far to the right, I hadn't intended on digging too deeply into today, but you can certainly ask questions or talk about it. That gets more specifically into how we think we're going to try to assess the objectives. And what I've generally found with these projects over time is these tables tend to be a little bit like living documents. We can modify them as we've learned more in the process, but usually the goals stay pretty much the way they are. Even the objectives don't tend to change that much as we learn more, but how we ended up measuring the objectives or evaluating in the evaluation criteria can be tweaked a bit more. So I don't worry this early in the process. I'm not worried too much about the evaluation criteria, but you're welcome to comment on that or offer any advice. So the first goal, again, this is more of our motor vehicle travel efficiency one. So provide for efficient travel through the interchange area based on existing and planned land uses in the area. And the 2 major things that we would be looking at would be, efficient travel for, the regional and frankly statewide traffic, along US 97. But then also in B, it's also providing for efficient travel on the local roadway system in the interchange area. So, and most of the way we'd be evaluating that is, ODOT, county, city, everybody has adopted mobility standards or targets, right, that identify what level of congestion they're really trying to keep things under. And that's largely what we'd be using to assess that. Anyone have any thoughts on that before I move to the second one? I think it's a fairly straightforward one. I'll go to the second one. You can, if something comes to you anytime on a goal we passed, that's all right, bring it up. The second one, that's our safety goal. So again, it's improving safety for all modes of travel. And the 2 main components of that one and the objectives. In the first one, it's really focused on, what can we do to reduce crashes? So it's reducing the frequency and severity of crashes for all modes with an emphasis on the severe and fatal crashes. The second one is a bit different approach to looking at safety. And this one is part of an IAMP. We're required to do an access management plan for the interchange crossroad for Baker IAMP. So really everything within a quarter mile of those ramp terminals, which it's kind of out to, if you go east, it's kind of where the road starts to bend up. And if you go west, I think it's about where Apache intersection is. So we have to do an access management plan for that, which is kind of standard IAMP practice. Obviously, if we could, improve the spacing of access points on there to eliminate conflicts, that would be the direction, the motivation to do. It certainly may be challenging given we're dealing with a very built environment, but at least we'll have to address it. And so because that is safety oriented, I put that under our ability to improve the spacing of access points under this goal. And again, this could be a place where we acknowledge any impacts or benefits to evacuation routes.
Any questions so far on goal number 2? I don't see any hands. I think we're ready for goal number 3.
All right, so goal number 3, this is our economy goal. So it says support the regional and local economic development. And the objectives under here are, this first one actually, it was kind of very specifically put in here because of another IAMP requirement. As actually part of this process related to the access management plan, there's kind of some specific steps we have to go through and kind of specific outreach to property owners that might be affected by any future access change. And the gist of it is even though it's very early and we're not in a design phase, we're still in planning. If we're going to potentially affect access, we need to outline what the decision-making criteria would be for if somebody's driveway got altered, moved, or something like that. So it's kind of a transparent process, and we need to send that to the property owners and make sure that they've seen it and they have a chance to comment. And as part of that decision-making process, we're required to make sure there's some criteria in there that respect the economic development objectives of existing and future businesses. And so I just went ahead and put that right into our objectives here because that's something that we are going to do and need to do. And that way it's kind of built into the process. There's hopefully no way to miss that. So that's what that is for. And then the second and third ones are a bit more freight related. The B there is developing interchange design that facilitates truck freight movement, both along US 97 and to and from destinations to the east, where there should be a lot more. Well, we already know there's a desire for trucks to go east to head out to US 20, but with more commercial and industrial development coming to east as well, expect that demand will only increase. And then acknowledging we've got a railroad running almost right through the middle of our project that is also moving freight. We do want to make sure that we're not doing anything to impede that. And so I built that into our objectives as well. And I'd be curious to hear if anyone has anything else in particular they would like to see considered under this goal.
I don't see any hands.
I can move to the next one. And like I
All
said,
right.
something comes to mind later.
Exactly. Please just interrupt. Don't wait for it to be called on.
So 4, this is our multimodal travel options one, which I think is particularly important here because, like I said, once again, this is a rural interchange. It was built that way, and there's not a lot of accommodations there for people walking and biking really through most of the whole area around here. And so knowing that there's a lot more urban development coming, possibly right up against this interchange, we really want to give this more of an urban feel from that standpoint as far as the quality of the walking and biking facilities. And so the first objective in here is, provide low stress walking and biking facilities to create east-west connectivity through the interchange area. And that east-west connectivity is kind of another big deal, because remember, if you look at it, that the aerial photo, there aren't a lot of ways to get across the parkway if you're walking or biking, for at least 2 miles, I think. So this is an important way to get across the highway for people that aren't driving. And then again, the trails, objective B, we want to identify where planned trails in the interchange area can be safely connected and accessed. I think there's one trail plan coming up from the south, and I think 2 from the north. And so again, we want to make sure we're helping connect those and not doing something that's going to make that harder. And the last one is, I guess, our transit-oriented objective, and this is considering how to accommodate future expanded Cascades East transit service. Which again, right now, I know their main objectives, my understanding of the future, is trying to get that stop moved to the east side of the tracks as opposed to being on the west side. Yeah.
So Bob Townsend was actually just describing to me a little while ago the path, the multimodal path that will tie Bend to the Lava Butte at some point. I don't have a good sense of where that. I know that the current concept is to cross 97 and have it go on the east side of 97 for a while. But I don't know where those crossings are envisioned. But is there a potential tie-in with this interchange and that overpass, or?
Yes, yeah, that's a good question. And there is an area of this interchange that we are looking at that will accommodate that path, as well as a potential trailhead parking area for that path. But we're really early in the process, and Bob could probably give you a better understanding of all the different issues that we have and are going to continue to have with locating the exact right of way where that path is going to lie. But yes, we are. The great thing about the timing of this IAMP is that we can develop the IAMP in parallel with developing the bike ped path for Lava Butte.
Yeah, I would definitely. I mean, when Bob mentioned the possibility that it would be like a tunnel underneath the highway, I mean, an overpass crossing seems a lot nicer than a tunnel under the highway. But I didn't know how feasible that would be.
Or just to expand on that, right now the preferred concept is that the trail from Bend to Lava Butte would tie in on the east side of this interchange and run parallel with 97 up to High Desert Museum and then go under there. The objective B here, this is a pretty general objective, but John, I may add that we add in here that specifically the Bend to Lava Butte trail needs coordinated, just so we're really clear on what that is. I mean, certainly Bend Parks and Rec has some other trails to the east that will need to be included as well, but certainly this specific one that has funding identified for planning and construction should be a highlight and definitely should weigh in on it. There's certainly some hoops to jump through on what we need to do as far as approvals, but certainly a statement saying that we need to provide long-term connectivity with that trail would be important as a goal.
We will do that.
Are we seeing Greg Bryant
Peter,
waving
yeah,
with his hand up?
Peter and Greg.
Yeah,
both.
can I say something?
Yes.
There where the, that's across from the High Desert Museum. If you have that, you could actually have a corridor going underneath the road to Deschutes River Woods, if you could. Because that road was like 15 feet above the ground there at level or something like that. So if you had that, you'd have one thing, you'd be able to decrease how much volume of Deschutes River Woods going through this interchange. And you also would save on, emergency vehicles would have a quicker way of getting to that area also. Because that could service probably, I'd say at least a sixth, if not a third of the Deschutes River Woods.
Yeah.
In and out of the area. But
Yeah,
you guys are looking at that.
So the pedestrian crossing at High Desert Museum undercrossing is definitely in the works now. We have a high level scoping concept that we've been working with Deschutes County and High Desert Museum for a interchange proposal at that location too, but it would have to be adopted into the Deschutes County TSP. And I know it's going to be a topic in their planning process moving forward, but nothing is firm on if that's even a priority for everyone. We've certainly engaged in spending some dollars to get that as a concept, but that, Greg, you're exactly right. It would be, it's multifold. It's access to the High Desert Museum, it's connectivity for our trail, and it also serves as an emergency access for Deschutes River Woods, and especially based on some of the fire egress that has been a priority over the last few years as a result of the Paradise Fire, then certainly that's been a hot topic even from a legislative standpoint.
Yes, okay, thanks.
And did we have one other question?
Peter.
Yeah,
Peter.
just for full disclosure, the F2 zoning on the east side of the highway may or may not allow a bike ped trail to be built there. We talked with ODOT back and forth. We're trying to get some input from DLCD, given what various administrative rules and our own zoning code says. So as Bob alluded to, there are several challenges of whether it could go on the east side or not.
Did you say F2?
Yeah, Forest 2 zoning. So as you come down the east side of the highway, you've got rural residential 10 for a while, then you got F2, then you have open space conservation. For the RR10 and the open space and conservation, it's not a problem. And then once you get to federal lands, obviously, they have the sovereignty over the land use. It's that F2 section that it's going to be a challenge.
Thank you. Any other questions on goal number 4? All right, I think we are ready to move on to number 5.
All right, 5. It's our equity goal. And as I mentioned before, again, we have objectives aimed at process as well as outcomes. So the first objective, actually, here's a question I've got. This was written, develop a project that supports ODOT's value of equity. It was very specific to ODOT's. And I don't know if when I read that more recently, I was wondering if folks might want that a bit more broadly. So it's not specifically just ODOT's. I'm seeing a head nod.
Yeah.
I'll make a note of that.
I was looking at the syntax of that number 5 goal. Develop a project that supports ODOT's value of equity. To me, I don't know what project we're referring to. Are we talking about developing something separately, or is the project actually this Baker area management plan?
I guess it would be the plan and I guess the resulting recommendation. So I'm under the assumption that this is going to recommend an improvement project to the interchange and potentially the area. right? So whatever our infrastructure or management strategies end up being.
For me, I would say, this is wordsmith, develop the project to support the community's value of equity. If you wanted something other than ODOT's. Does that make sense?
It does.
Okay.
Thank you.
No, thank you.
So our first objective, again, is more process oriented, where we want to make sure that we're providing an equitable decision-making process that encourages participation by everyone. And again, I'm really hoping we're really trying to target folks to participate on our project advisory committee that hopefully have a lot of insight and good connections into a diverse range of, our community stakeholders. And I really want to get a lot of input from them on how best to connect to these different community members that, historically may not, get the opportunity to plug into a project like this. Again, we want to, as far as, how we want to evaluate that, we're going to want to look at, I guess, how did we, come up with a plan to reach out with the historically underrepresented community members, and did we follow through on that? Did we reach out? But then also, I want to hear back on how effective that was, through the process. So not just did we, put the notice in the mail, but are people feeling like they had an opportunity, whether they chose to participate or not? Did they choose to feel like they had an option and were able to do it? And then the second objective is looking at the allocation of potential burdens and benefits among community members. So it's, again, as far as how to evaluate that, it could be looking at things like physical, or maybe not physical, could be a noise impact, but looking at where our improvements are having impacts, and are they disproportionately hitting certain people, or are the kind of the benefits and burdens being shared in a way that I guess we all feel is appropriate. And so that's something that, through this process, when we're evaluating the alternatives, we want to bring that information forward for consideration so everybody can see that as well. And it can be part of the decision-making process.
Rita has her hand up as well.
Thank you. Rita, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I'm just curious on kind of how we're increasing that accessibility to our historically underrepresented community members. So being part of the BIPOC community, the level of like how are we making this information not only in a language that humans understand, but also within context and words that humans understand. I feel like in this goals and objectives conversation, it seems really clear to me. And also I've been extensively learning about all of this information for the past 6 months. And so how does the rest of the community kind of digest that? And then also, how do they understand, and are we able to communicate with them how that will change and shift their community?
I'm making notes of this. I think those are exactly the kinds of questions I want to not only have with folks in those communities, but again, I was hoping to have our PAC meeting earlier, but we're reaching out to a lot of folks. It's taken a while to get that all together, and those are definitely questions I want to raise to people on that committee there as well, and really help us figure out if we do need to communicate things differently at times to help with that.
Yeah, and I think that I definitely feel, as we're talking, this like this kind of like speeding along, right? Because that's what happens with projects, is there's the bureaucracy and the tape, and then it just takes this really, really long time. And also when we talk about equity, that means that putting time, not completely to the side, but understanding when we're reaching out to communities that maybe don't have time to sit on these meetings and have these conversations, that time might have to take a step to the side to make sure that we're having all of the voices heard, especially because in the south of Bend, the community could be seeing this like interchange as a way to support, but it can also be seen as a way of like experimentation, right? Like, oh, well, this is like the south side of Bend, and like how many community members are feeling excited about it, how many community members are feeling really wary about it. And that as we're working on this project, how do we kind of explain and really guide them as we're kind of going to make a lot of traffic before we can bring relief to the traffic, right?
Thank you. Thank you for that.
Are there any other comments or questions about goal number 5? I don't see any hands. Rita, do you want to go ahead and put your virtual hand back down? That's the part I always forget too. Excellent.
Before we leave goal 5, Rita, I just want to respond to something you said is about the timing, right? And that we may need to slow down to make sure that we're actually giving people the opportunity. And, I know it is on my mind that while we've laid out the schedule, right, and it shows, okay, here's our process, we're going to run through this, is that we very well may hear from, say, our advisory committee members, right, about methods that we may need to use to, right, engage different people. And so I think we do have to be ready to adjust to that, right? We may not fit our kind of preconceived outline or timeline.
That makes me really excited, John, because I think that a lot of the times where it gets lost is that like we're imposing timelines upon people instead of being like, hey, we really want to get this done, and like it's important to have these conversations.
Thank you.
All right, I think we're ready to move on to the next slide.
All right, 6 this is our consistency goal. So this again, acknowledging there's been a lot of planning done in the area, and so we want to be consistent with that. So it says develop solutions that are consistent with the established shared corridor vision and adopted state and local plans. So the objectives in here are create a US 97 corridors compatible with the recommendations from the US 97 Parkway Plan and the Bend to Lava Butte Refinement Plan, which I expect they will be. It's also ensuring compatibility with future planned growth in Bend's opportunity areas and expansion areas, which again was, one of the, I think the drivers or motivators to get ahead and do this effort. So surely we want to make sure that we're in step with that. The last one in here, I put in because this was actually one of the objectives from the North Interchange project. And since this one is kind of similar in that it's like the opposite bookend, I thought it would at least be interesting for conversation. And in that project, they were considering that if we do an interchange, in their case, it was a whole new one, not just a modification, but it's acting as the gateway into Bend from the north. So they wanted to have some consideration to, the impact on, the visual sequence of the project element. So how is it contributing as a gateway into Bend, right? Is it, sorry, the engineers, is it another ugly interchange, or is there something maybe interesting or unique about it, or at least the opportunity to do something interesting or unique to act as a gateway feature? So yeah, like I said, given that this one is, the South Gateway effectively coming into Bend, I thought I would at least offer that one up for folks to consider if they wanted that to be a part of this, evaluation process. Thoughts on that? Anything we might be missing as far as consistency? Of course, the the path consistency that was brought up, we will include under goal 4. What do you think about adding that third one that I mentioned, that regarding considering this as a potential to contribute to a gateway into Bend? Is that worth having in here? Does it seem very important?
John, this is Tyler. I mean, I think it's important just based on prior work that's happened. I don't know if anybody on this call was engaged when the Murphy Overcrossing project was under design 10 years ago now, but the visual components aspects of that project, we spent a lot of time on that, discussing that. And that was based on prior MPO board members, prior city council, county commission, members. And so it seems to me, at least just based on historical discussions, that it is important.
I also agree that it is important. It seems to me to be kind of an equity issue, similar to our east-west problems that we have in the city, that, same kind of, we are proud of our whole city, all parts of our city. It seems like that visual gateway to the city, I think it's important. Maybe it's because I'm a Monty Python fan. Bring me a shrubbery. I can't see that shrubbery that says Bend without thinking about that. Always puts a grin on my face. All right, I don't see any more hands.
Oh, I got Phil. Phil has a comment.
Thank you, Commissioner Chang.
So if we're still looking for a place to address Gregory's concern about the egress, the emergency egress, for wildfire reasons, to the extent that that egress is identified as a need in the community wildfire protection plan that for Deschutes River Woods, then this would be a place, to add a D that says, consistent with the, Deschutes River Woods Community Wildfire Protection Plan, we need to take care of safe egress out of this area in case of a fire emergency or something like that. And I actually don't know whether the CWPP, the Community Wildfire Protection Plan that covers this area, has identified that egress as a concern. But if it does, then this would be one place where we could get that in.
Okay, thanks.
I think that's an excellent point, Phil. I think we would like to spell that out somewhere in these goals, that fire egress absolutely is top of mind for us. Great. I think that's a great suggestion.
Yeah, I mean, evacuation from Deschutes River Woods in case of wildfire. I mean, there's a lot of there's not, the road system is not a grid in there. It is, there's a lot of windy, loops and, disconnects and things like that. So if egress at this point is really important, then we definitely want to emphasize that.
Excellent. Any other comments on goal number 6? Comments, questions? I think we're ready to move on. It looks like we've got about 10 minutes left for our scheduled time.
And this is my last goal slide, so we're almost on target here, time-wise. So my last goal I've got in here, goal 7. Again, this is the practical goal. We want to develop implementable solutions for the interchange area. And so kind of in that vein of making sure that we're not doing something that's not going to be possible to build or very, very challenging. The objectives under here are minimizing impacts on resource lands, ensuring public funds are invested efficiently and effectively, and solutions are fiscally responsible. Another way I look at that is, do we reasonably think we could actually pay for these improvements? C is develop solutions that can be implemented in phases. So obviously it's beneficial if, larger project can be broken down into smaller pieces, which are easier to fund and construct more quickly. And develop a design that is constructible, which would obviously be important, and could also reasonably be maintained. So for probably ODOT in particular, who may be owning this, we want to make sure we're not creating a future problem. So any thoughts on those?
I'm thrilled to see the word maintenance in there. Any questions, comments about this last goal?
I was going to the extent that we needed to worry about wildlife collisions, I was going to suggest an add-on to objective A, or maybe some kind of tie-in there, between the resource lands, and natural resources, scenic and historic areas, open spaces, wildlife. But Andrea was kind enough to send me during this meeting a little bit of data about wildlife collisions, and it's not like there's none, but it's definitely not the worst. It's not the worst part of Highway 97 or the state highways in this region. So, I don't know if we need to have.
I like it, and I think you're right. I think that's a fine place for it, is on that list of things where we want to minimize impacts. So we want to minimize impacts on wildlife. Does seem to fit for me in with natural resources, scenic and historic areas, and open spaces. Wildlife seems like it fits in that group for me as well.
David Abbas has a question.
Great. Go ahead, David.
Good afternoon, everybody. And yeah, me too, Barb, like the maintenance aspect there. No, just not on the infrastructure, but across the board. And it was mentioned earlier, so thank you, John. But whether that is the aesthetic pieces and entry into the community and exit, landscaping, not just the hard surface infrastructures, but keeping maintenance in mind is always good. And then just a thought come to mind, I don't know, maybe I missed it. The Baker Road and Railroad, and then there's, been talk of multimodal and things, which is all good. I just want to throw out there, is there been any discussion or desire for that crossing to be a quiet zone? There's not much of the railroad to the east, but west of that railroad, there's a number of, residents and things in there. And you mentioned the school and the store. So I just thought I'd throw that out there for consideration at this early stage.
Yeah. Regarding the quiet zone, at least for me, early in our process, I don't think I have heard that come up before. And I don't know if anyone else has.
Either. I didn't know there was such a thing as a quiet zone.
Well, we hear it at the at-grade crossings within the city. There is such a thing, Barb. It's takes investment and infrastructure and things to get to that point, but thought I'd throw it out there at this early stage.
Thank you.
Rick Williams also has his hand raised.
Go right ahead, Rick.
Great, thank you. Going back to the wildlife strikes on 97, I actually worked on that wildlife study years ago that ended up with the fenced portion of 97 from Lava Butte south to the Sun River interchange. And we didn't see as many strikes in that area from Baker Road to Lava Butte, primarily based on what the biologist told us. From Deschutes River Wood south to Lava Butte on the west side is all a giant lava bed.
Oh.
Deer do not like going across lava beds. For some reason, that doesn't work with their hooves. So there's probably not a huge need to look at wildlife strikes in that area. The second thing, the areas where we have installed fencing and undercrossings, it's where the ownership is national forest on both sides, not private property. And in this case, we have private property in both areas. So that's just based on the projects we've done in the past and what biologists have told me. So do with it what you want, but I want to kind of inform you a little bit there.
So, Rick, what I hear, I think what you're saying is minimizing impacts is actually, that's an action statement, and there just might not be ways for us to minimize impacts to wildlife at that particular location. Is that what I hear you saying?
Correct. Based on, again, my understanding of the science behind it, if you're going to do that sort of thing, you want to have an undercrossing and have it fenced. And again, we usually only do that sort of thing where it's national forest, not private ownership, because you end up buying right away and building the fence. But also when you look at their critical winter range and where they cross the highway, that's usually up closer to Lava Butte itself, and from there south down to Chemalt, not in that immediate area where there's the lava beds on the west side of the highway.
Yeah, that's interesting, Rick. That's a really interesting point. So for me, I can see where even the wildlife fit in with natural resources, scenic and historic areas, and open spaces. Wildlife doesn't necessarily fit under the goal of implementable solutions for the interchange area. So for me, and maybe for Phil as well, I think we would still like to see wildlife somewhere in these goals, some consideration for wildlife, but I do understand why it might not be under develop implementable solutions.
How about under the soon to be added environment goal?
Perfect. Great.
Yeah. But again, given what Rick just explained to us about how there's not a lot of wildlife use in this area because lava beds, it may not be, I mean, it may not be the most urgent thing to call out either.
Right.
Andrea has a question as well.
Please.
Yeah, so not really a question, but just for your information, a section in our Metropolitan Transportation Plan does have that I had sent out. You know, we have some data around this for density of strikes, which shows that area is kind of a much lower density. And also we do have the maps for the migration areas across 97 that if you would like to simply reference those.
I think that would be good. That, you know, just as that signal to the community that we absolutely did consider this. Here are the maps we looked at. I think that's a good suggestion, Andrea.
Yep, thanks.
Any other questions or comments? I think at this point we can say on any of the goals. My comment has to do kind of with Councillor Schenkelberg's concerns. And so I'm wondering, have I already forgotten it because it was close to the top of the list? But in addition to the committee, do we also want an outreach plan? Or are we expecting that the committee will be, that's why we have them, is for that outreach.
Yeah, the Public Advisory Committee, that's going to be the main point of public outreach. And I'm hoping, I think similar to what you had mentioned earlier, was each of those members on the Public Advisory Committee, they in turn will hopefully reach out to other constituents that would be very interested in being involved with developing this plan.
Yeah, I don't know if this addresses your comment, but just as Dawn had said, was my expectation is that the input that we get from our packet, especially our first meeting, which I think is, we're going to spend a significant amount of time talking about that in particular, is that input and outcome can then form up our outreach strategy.
Excellent, thank you. All right. Have we got, well, I'm looking for my agenda. What is next? Hovey, Tyler, you want to help me out?
Yeah, we have a little bit of time, on the agenda for public comment. I know we've been taking it throughout the discussion, but if there's any additional, I think we would welcome that now.
Thank you. Yes, we would. So we're all looking for hands.
Comments.
Okay, I don't see any. Speaking of that outreach, I just this last week got a compliment on Councillor Schenkelberg's Instagram account, and what a great job she's doing informing the public of what all we're up to. So, I just think that's something for all of us to take away is, yes, this is what our job is. This is why the MPO has elected officials. This is why ODOT looks to elected officials, is for us to reach back out to the community with information. All right.
Thanks, Barb.
I think we're ready to adjourn almost exactly on time. Thank you, everybody. Thanks so much. Please, any other follow-up, just send straight to myself or to Tyler or to ODOT, and we will get, if there are any other questions, anything about this, we can talk about it at our next regularly scheduled MPO business meeting, which is in the middle of next month. All right, we are adjourned. Thanks so much, everybody.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.